YouTube frogs, welcome back to another complete guide, this time covering our favorite boba drinker, Kamisato Ayato. We'll be breaking down his talents and covering how he plays, potential weapon choices, constellations, artifact choices, team comps, and showcasing him in the abyss. If you're new here, first off, welcome to the channel and appreciate you dropping by. I also stream most nights on Twitch, feel free to check out my chaotically chill community over there. Link in the description. Alright, let's begin. But before we continue, I'd like to introduce the sponsor of this video, Lord of Heroes. Lord of Heroes is an extremely unique mobile RPG. Clean and aesthetically pleasing graphics are paired with an engaging story to make for endless fun. Also, with the new story update, War of the Tyrants, you can go back in time and witness history with your own eyes. Recruit your heroes to revolutionize and conquer the world as a monarch. With fantastic options for gear, you can upgrade any heroes you want all the way to 6 stars and build them to fit your playstyle. Along with the War of the Tyrants story update, a new dark hero, Xlice, has been added, so it's a perfect time to start playing. Download Lord of Heroes now using the download link in the description below and embark on your journey today. Now, back to the video. Here's what to expect for base investment from My Ayato. Level 80 out of 80, he's Constellation 0, level 1, 6 talents. Just like Tartag, Ayato's normal attack talent contributes nothing to his stance change. I'll be personally running a 4-piece Gladiator set for most of the demonstrations, additionally going over Heart of Depth set and Echo set, burst DPS options like Emblem, and other fun niche options like Thundering Fury. We'll discuss all the options and when certain sets are optimized. For his main stats, I'll be running standard attack-based DPS artifacts, attack timepiece, Hydro Goblet, and a crit rate or crit damage mask. With many crit rate weapon options and a crit rate ascension stat, we can reliably run a crit damage mask most of the time. Here's what the rest of my artifacts look like, and stat layout with the R1 Black Sword. I have decent crit rate and decent crit damage with a little bit of energy recharge. I find it okay to forego energy recharge completely if relying entirely on his TK stance, and only using his burst whenever it happens to be available. So, how does he work? The combination of his elemental skill and normal attack resembles Tartag. He's a stance change character provided by his elemental skill, with unique multipliers making his normal attack talent obsolete. His burst resembles Ganyu's burst but in Hydro form. Same AI mechanics, slightly longer duration, lower total ticks, meaning lower total potential damage output. Let's break down his elemental skill and burst. Kamisato Art, Kyoka. First, Ayato shifts positions and enters Haki Meguri Kanka or TK stance. His normal attacks become Hydro-infused and have unique multipliers called Shin Suiken. These multipliers scale with elemental skill talent level, but are considered normal attack damage, same with Tartag. 2. The illusion that's left behind explodes when it's near enemies or duration expires. The main utility of this is for the Ascension 1 passive, granting max Namisen stacks if exploded. Usually you won't pay attention to this too much though. 3. These Namisen stacks are simply max HP based additional damage to his TK stance autos. He starts at 2 stacks with A1 and goes to 4 at C1 and below, or up to 5 at C2+. 4. He cannot charge or plunging attack in this form and has increased interruption resistance. Now, for additional meaningful details. TK stance lasts 6 seconds. With 0 attack speed buffs, Ayato can proc 15 total hits or 5 total rotations of S3. This gives a total base multiplier damage of 1,284% in 6 seconds. This damage improves with his own Namisen stacks, which were not included in this, attack speed boosts from Yunjin C6, Jin C2, and other attack speed boosters, and additional team utility like Yunjin's normal attack damage ammo. During TK stance, Ayato also generates 1 to 2 Hydro Orbs every 2 seconds for a total of 3 times in 6 seconds. Now, how strong are the Namisen stacks? 4 stacks at level 6 provides 3.28% max HP damage bonus to each of his Shinsuiken autos. My Ayato, at level 80, has 17,400 HP. At level 90, he'll hit about 20,000 HP. I'm not currently running Jade Cutter, so if you had Jade Cutter, this would improve this more, so we'll settle on 20,000 HP as a generic threshold. So this mathematically equates to about 650 total raw damage for each auto, but this doesn't really factor enemy resistances and defense in general game formula. So instead, here's a visual of 2 stack to 4 stack, giving a 17% boost to an unbuffed Ayato. I purposely reset his attack loop to only use the S1 each time. You can also visually see the stacks he has with his aura. With this, we can estimate that these stacks to be responsible for a 20 to 35% boost to his Shinsuiken autos. The more attack he has from team buffs, the less percentage boost his Namisen stacks will provide since they are based off of his HP. Just know that they are definitely very meaningful. However, this max HP scaling is not strong enough to warrant HP percent main stat. View this as extra scaling damage. Kamisato Art, Suiyu. Ayato unleashes an AoE field that continuously rains down bloom water blades that deal AoE hydro damage. Active characters within this field gain a normal attack damage bonus as well. Simply put, this is highly similar to Ganyu's burst, with similar pseudo-random targeting that can be manipulated to one spot by grouping enemies. Ayato's burst strikes a total of 36 times in 18 seconds, dealing up to 3,500% AoE damage. Though it does have an 80 energy cost, this is mitigated slightly by his Ascension 4, regenerating 2 flat energy per second if he's under 40 energy. A4's major use is in burst DPS situations where you activate then swap off. Typically though, only 20 flat energy is returned in these rotations because he'll likely swap back in within 10 seconds or so. With Ayato as a main DPS using his own buff, he gains near 0 with this passive. So, when looking at his talents, one might ask, is it more beneficial to consider his on-field DPS with elemental skill or only burst DPS? In my opinion, though Ayato's burst damage does have similar qualities to Ganyu's burst, the damage output is significantly lower even with full Venti quadratic scaling assist. While Ayato's burst strikes 36 times in 18 seconds, Ganyu's strikes 50 times in 15 seconds and are 5% stronger strikes at the same level. So this means Ayato's burst is about 30% weaker than Ganyu's burst. So while he is an insane hydro enabler for freeze teams and the like, I believe that his gameplay design incentivizes you to use him as an on-field DPS with TK stance. Also, all of his constellations, which we'll get to, assist with only TK stance, and the fluidity of rotations without relying on energy or downtime is a huge benefit. So for this reason, I recommend elemental skills prioritized over the burst for talent priority. Normal attack talent can be left at level 1. Strictly speaking though, you'll probably have elemental skill and burst at the same level, but if you were ever considering which to prioritize first, for example if you're crowning, I'd recommend elemental skill. They both deserve level 8 or higher though. Alright, playstyle time. Let's discuss the nuances of both aspects of his playstyle, TK stance and burst DPS. His initial position shift only backsteps if no directional key. Doing this may more consistently have it explode and deal damage, but in my experience, it doesn't matter too much. Applying a direction will cause him to shift forward, leaving the illusion behind him exploding after the duration is over normally. Most will encounter this second scenario. With regards to his enemy tracking, the range is really nice. His AI tracks enemies even if they are knocked back by his autos or change position around him, leading to an excellent hold left click autopilot playstyle. And that's right, you don't need to spam left click. Just holding the left click button casts his entire duration and you know when it's over when he stops attacking. The AoE of his hits are also excellent and intuitive. If enemies are in a general area around his epicenter of attack, they will be hit by the AoE. So personally, I have not noticed any caveats to just holding left click and letting him do his thing. The elemental skill is on a very intuitive cooldown as well, giving 5 to 6 seconds of downtime to swap off for other characters and come back and it's ready to go. I find these things to be excellent quality of life that makes him satisfying to use. Now for his burst. The only real thing to be concerned about is the very long animation time. Usually, if I want to use his burst in a rotation, I will fire it first, as not only does it take a solid 2.5 seconds to activate, but it also lasts for 18 seconds. Then I swap out and make use of Ascension 4 passive for the flat energy gain. So for the most common situation of Ayato Venti to maximize group DPS, I'll actually fire Ayato's burst first, then Venti's burst. Don't worry about Venti by the way, Ayato's TK stance fully hits all enemies within Venti's burst. Now other situations, Ayato's burst can also be used to lead and provide a normal attack boost to himself. However, this sacrifices A4 passive. It can also be used at the end of his TK stance rotation to prolong Hydro application for the next teammate and to use A4. However, no normal attack boost for himself. I find both of these situations perfectly viable. Choose one that fits your playstyle or whatever your composition may need. As for the general playstyle of which to choose, I feel that both are equally viable. Going based on gameplay design intention like I mentioned, Ayato's main driving point is the satisfaction of his elemental skill. It's buffable by attack speed and by raw DPS, making it both scalably strong and a spectacle to see. If you main the TK stance playstyle, the burst just exists as a convenience whenever it's up. On the flip side, if you like just burst DPS and swap out, the TK stance exists as a convenience to fill time between character cooldowns. I think the comfort and easiness of both these playstyles makes Ayato very satisfying to use and flexible for multiple team situations. Alright, so what weapons to prioritize for Ayato? I recommend maximizing his raw DPS, and if energy is needed, grab it from the artifacts and the substats. We have options from the 3-star weapons all the way to the 5-star weapons, so there should be something for every traveler out there. We'll mostly be focusing on his unbuffed Shinsuiken damage without his burst active, specifically for his 15-hit average rotation and then his standalone burst damage tick. As usual, I'll be using crit rate food for visual consistency and making testing easier for myself. These are the weapons that I find have some generic use for him. 3-star Harbinger of Dawn. This has been a really cost-efficient sword to invest in, but it does require some form of HP protection, most often by shields. 4-star Amenoma Kageuchi. This is the Inazuma budget craftable option that provides attack percent and a little bit of energy refund. Four-star Flute. This is also a budget gacha option that provides attack percent and a little extra damage from the passive. Note that this passive procs fairly infrequently per rotation due to the 0.5 second cooldown. Four-star Blackcliff Longsword. This is the standard crit damage option available via the Star Glitter. Four-star a Black Sword. This is the normal attack-based crit rate option available via the Battle Pass. So, those are the only 4 stars I really would recommend using. Elemental skill-based weapons, Sacrificial Sword, and Festering Desire only activate on his illusion, not any of his Shinsuiken attacks, so I don't recommend these as they reduce his damage output quite significantly. 4 5-star weapons, he has a pretty solid roster available to him. Skyward Blade. This is the weakest weapon damage-wise, but the weapon does have some meaningful stats, like crit rate, attack speed, and a little bit of recharge. It's overkill on the recharge, but this weapon does have meaningful stats. Summon Shaper. This is always an option if you run him with Zhongli. It's a really good attack percent stat stick, and if you have crit rate and crit damage artifacts, then this weapon will serve quite well. Primordial Jade Cutter. This is the easiest to build around with the huge crit rate buff up to 44% at level 90, and the added benefit of the additional HP scaling. This is universally strong on Ayato. Alright, so this is the signature weapon, crit rate secondary stat, a 12% all elemental damage bonus, and then the passive, which is pretty easy, 2 stacks if nearby party members use their elemental skills. Really straightforward. And then finally, I left the Mist Splitter last since I don't have an R180 version. I only have an R590. This weapon is a universally strong option that maximizes strength after activating the burst. Most of the time, he'll be running 2 stacks from the elemental damage normal attacks and less than 100% energy. If you have your burst up to activate, then you'll get the 3rd stack. Okay, so taking a look at all these weapons, I would say Ayato has a really solid weapon roster. Harbinger of Dawn. If you can keep his HP threshold, it's a really good solid budget option that rivals the 4-star weapons. For the 4-star options, they're basically all like 5% within each other. I would primarily stick with the Blackcliff Longsword and the Black Sword though, since he shines the most in an AoE setting, which maximizes Blackcliff's stack potential against AoE enemies, and the normal attacks are his main source of consistent DPS and TK stance. Amenoma is the default craftable, and then Flute is basically an inferior version of the Amenoma. For our 5-star options, the only weapon I wouldn't fully suggest is the Skyward Blade. Though it does have meaningful stats that Ayato uses completely, I feel that the raw DPS is lacking super heavily for a 5-star weapon. In my opinion, this is only on par with the 4-star weapons, not any better. As we mentioned, Summit Shaper is excellent with Zhongli, providing insane attack percent, assuming decent artifacts to supply the crit rate and crit damage. Jade Cutter, well-known staple, universally strong synergy with Ayato's kit, decent damage overall. Haen, this is by far the strongest normal attack-based weapon that you can see off of the numbers, and it's really easy to maintain the passive stacks. So for TK stance players, definitely the go-to. Mist Splitter, this is really similar to the Jade Cutter, providing universally strong synergy. This has a higher damage ceiling with its 3-stack elemental damage potential, but at the expense of a lower crit rate consistency because you're sacrificing the 44 crit rate that the Jade Cutter has. But if you're running burst DPS Ayato, then Mist Splitter is definitely the best choice. So, for my personal recommendations then, for TK stance, which is the melee auto attacks, Haen over the Mist Splitter equal to the Jade Cutter. Basically the same type of weapon for TK stance. Over Black Sword, over Harbinger of Dawn. For burst DPS, prioritize Mist Splitter number 1, then Jade Cutter, then Blackcliff Longsword due to AoE if you're running burst DPS like with Venti or something. Amenoma for the standard attack percent, also for burst refund, and Harbinger of Dawn for the 3-star weapon. Universal choices if you can't decide which one: Mist Splitter, Jade Cutter, or Harbinger of Dawn. Onto Ayato's artifacts. For my TK stance players, we have a nice selection. My personal preference, 4-piece Gladiator set. Universal 18% attack and 35% normal attack damage increase. No need for charge punch attack, so this passive works great. On the flip side, equally great as well, 4-piece Heart of Depth set. Universal 15% Hydro damage and 30% normal charge damage increase after elemental skill activation. This is 100% uptime for Ayato in TK stance. Additionally, fun to try out, but will require refarming an entire 4-piece set, the Echoes set. This is the RNG normal attack increaser based on a user's active attack. If committing to this 4-piece set for Ayato, note that weapons like Blackcliff and Jade Cutter that provide more attack percent alongside their crit stats become more valuable due to how the artifact works. The higher the active character's attack, the higher the RNG normal attack increase. And lastly, a more unique build involving 4 Thundering Fury. This build aims to have a little fun with higher uptime on his elemental skill in taser compositions due to the cooldown decrease from 4-piece set bonus. In this demonstration, I almost have 100% elemental skill uptime with 4-piece Thundering Fury. Now, for burst DPS, no surprises. 4-piece Emblem set, 4-piece Noblesse set, or 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Heart of Depth combo. 4-piece Emblem will have the highest damage potential, even with minimal recharge. 4-piece Noblesse aims for the team attack percent buff, and Noblesse Heart of Depth is a middle ground between the two. As for other 2-piece options, go with any combo of attack percent, artifact sets, hydro damage percent, recharge percent, or burst damage percent. In this stage of Genshin, if you can't manage a 4-piece set, aim for solid substats instead until you farm for a decent 4-piece set. Alright, let's cover main stats and potential builds. So first, we have TK stance Ayato. For this, attack timepiece, Hydro Goblet, and a crit damage over a crit rate mask. So we have a lot of swords that provide crit rate, and combined with this ascension stat, these should pretty easily help you reach 60 or higher crit rate naturally. With this, I think it should be easy to run a crit damage mask most of the time. For burst DPS Ayato, attack equal to the energy recharge timepiece. Hydro Goblet, and a crit damage is equal to the crit rate mask. So the timepiece depends on whether you prioritize his burst doing maximum damage or have maximum uptime. His effective burst cost is around 60 to 65 instead of 80, with his A4 passive in this particular rotation where you activate his burst and then immediately swap off. In fast swap compositions, typically energy generation is rather high, so usually he won't have trouble maintaining his uptime. You can always TK stance for additional energy as well. For the mask, crit damage or crit rate depends on the weapon of choice. If you commit to full DPS, you'll probably run crit damage mask. If you want to have him more supporty with like an energy recharge weapon for example, then probably a crit rate mask will better suit your needs. And lastly, energy recharge recommendations. I find that TK stance Ayato doesn't really need that much recharge. A little bit of Ascension 4 passive and on-field particle generation equals quite a bit of energy funneling. 110 to 125 seems about stable for me. For burst DPS Ayato, could use a little bit more since his burst uptime is more important. I find 140% to be a sweet spot for most fluid rotations, especially with Venti funneling if they are in the same team. Here's what my current Ayato stats look like with the crit damage mask, and this is with the Black Sword at R1. You can see 74.5 to 209 with 120 recharge. And then if I had the Jade Cutter at R180, it'll look like this. About 2k attack with 90 crit on 209 crit damage, 120 recharge. So I'm fairly content with these stats. If I were to look for improvement, I would increase his attack and also his crit damage. Time for Constellations. So what can you expect from Ayato's Constellation? More boosts to his TK stance autos, with not really any benefit to his burst damage. Constellation 1. So his TK stance autos do 40% more against low HP enemies. The 40% more is in the same category as Hydro and normal attack damage, so the actual strength is more like a 25% DPS increase to below 50% HP enemies. Constellation 2. Nami-Sin stack max count increases from 4 to 5. And if he has at least 3 stacks, then his max HP is increased by 50%. So this takes from his base max HP, which at level 90 is 13.7k. So this would give about a 6.9k HP boost to Ayato. Nice. Saving you the math, this improves his Namisen boost by nearly 70%, which is pretty fat. Visuals if you want to see how that's determined. This is with level 6 on his talent levels. So overall gain with this to his auto attacks is about a 20 to 25% DPS increase. Constellation 3, plus 3 levels to his elemental skill. It's around 20% more DPS. Constellation 4, his burst gives a 15% normal attack speed increase. It's more buffs to his TK stance. Constellation 5 is just plus 3 burst levels. And finally, Constellation 6. So this is very, very close in design to Ayaka C6. It's a brief nuke to his first auto after switching to TK stance. These two strikes are much stronger than his normal auto attacks, but they do not get the boost from Namisen. So I think the reason why they didn't add the Namisen stacks here is because usually his first auto isn't at full stacks yet. And depending on whether you have the illusion explode, you may or may not get maximum stacks immediately. So they probably wanted consistency and removed the Namisen stacks here in favor of a higher static multiplier of 450% attack here. So yeah, that's Ayato's Constellations. All of them are focused on his melee auto attacks, like I mentioned, with zero design focus on his burst. I find this pretty interesting. Team comps. How would one build around Ayato? Holy crap, you can slot him in like all genres of team comps. He's really flexible. The TK stance is generally preferred, but burst DPS is also an easy option. So I'll cover burst DPS first, as I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Best duo partner here, Venti. Ayato plus Venti for maximum burst synergy. His TK stance attacks can also hit within Venti's burst for added synergy. From here, we can move into a freeze composition with cryo DPS or taser composition with electro characters. Both freeze and taser work fairly well. I find that vaporized team comps surrounded around Ayato and Venti's burst not the most consistent, so if running this, I would incentivize sticking with freeze and taser. Ayaka plus Ayato plus Venti. This is the sibling duo destruction, enabling Ayaka's burst to reach maximum effectiveness with the range of Ayato's Hydro application. Similar situation with Ganyu Ayato Venti. This is also insane, capitalizing on their pseudo-quadratic scaling mechanics, wiping AoE extremely quickly. It's like a whirlpool Ganyato effect. And then Ayato plus Venti plus any Electro sub DPS also produces crazy Electro charge reactions. Make sure Ayato into Venti first, like I mentioned in Playstyles. This will let Venti Hydro infuse, then adding in Electro will cause maximum Electro charge reactions. Now, for TK stance. One of my favorite supports for Ayato is Yunjin, especially C6 Yunjin. With a self-sufficient kit, on Favonius Lance, and a 60 cost burst, Yunjin provides 30 ammo that is really easily expendable by Ayato given the AoE nature of his TK stance. If he hits 5 enemies with his first strike, then that uses 5 of Yunjin's ammo and they all buff. Ayato also builds really easily with crit damage and attack speed, which maximizes Yunjin's support power by utilizing all of her ammo. So, you can combine this duo with anything. More buffing with like Bennett, for example, Electro Charge with like Beidou or Official, Animo like Sucrose Kazuha, and you're good to go. Pyro-oriented teams. So Ayato's flexibility as a Hydro character lands him as another solid contender for Pyro Enabler. He works perfectly fine as the glue in National Team with Bennett, Xiangling, Ayato +1. Usually like Animo like Kazuha or Sucrose, or a battery like Raiden Shogun. Even though his kit does not have unique mechanics like Tartag's Riptides or Xingqiu's very high single target Hydro application, he still fits very snugly as a Xiangling Tornado Enabler. For these teams, Ayato can also slot in with any cryo burst DPS like Ganyu, Ayaka, Kaya, Rosaria for infinite freezes. As an on-field Hydro applier, he fits snugly for his lower damage but higher comfort team. If he becomes the burst DPS support for these compositions, then he lets Ganyu or Ayaka shine. Taser teams. Ayato's base kit design surrounding his normal attack allows him to easily utilize Fischl C6 and Beidou for easy double electro taser composition. Combined with Bennett as a buffer and healer, this staple also fits Ayato really well. Sunfire Ayato. So this comp slots in Ayato's AoE burst on top of the Sunfire foundation of Bennett's burst and Jean's burst. Add in a sub-DPS Electro 4th character like Fischl C6 or Beidou, while Ayato is on the field in TK stance during all the bursts active, leads to a swirl fest of reactions. I find this core composition to be really fun, but it does use 2 high-profile healers, Jean and Bennett. So, as you can see, Ayato is really incredibly flexible no matter how you decide to utilize him. Attack speed comp, Venti AoE, Pyro Enabler, National Slot-in, Freeze, Taser, Sunfire, you name it. Combined with really solid tracking AI in his melee stance, his reliability of comfort play is very high. Alright, let's showcase some of these Ayato compositions. He'll be running the R1 Black Sword at level 80 for all the demos. Cue the music, Mr. Cope.
我试试刀法。太好了！这招有意思。摇过去。倒下。接着压，还没结束。太好了！幽灵。
And with the showcase complete, that about wraps up the core of this guide. With diverse playstyle options and flexible composition layouts, Ayato glues many team comps together as both an on-field and off-field DPS. If this guide helped you understand Ayato a little better, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's free and really helps the video get recommended and reach a broader audience. Thanks for watching, and I wish that everyone still trying to wish for Ayato the best of luck. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.